going to start recording here. And Gary McDowell is going to go first. And Gary McDowell's Aflame won the 2019 White Pine Press Poetry Prize, is now available. He is also the author of 5 other books, including most recently Caesura Essays, and that's from Otis Books, Seismicity Editions, 2017. This poem forthcoming in, among others, Ploughshares, Poetry Northwest, Cimarron Review, which I worked for, so that was cool, and the Journal. He is an associate professor of English and creative writing at Belmont University in Nashville. And let me spotlight you, Gary. There we go. And take it away.
Well, thank you, Alan. I appreciate you and appreciate Matt, too, for putting us in touch with one another and getting this opportunity here to read with Justin. I'm looking forward to hearing his work as well. So, as Alan said, I'll be reading from Aflame, which is my brand new book. It just came out a couple weeks back, and it's a pleasure to read from it to you tonight. I'm going to start by reading from the title poem. So the title of the book, Aflame, comes from 2 kind of separate images. When I was in college in the summers, I worked at the fire station where my stepfather was chief. And one of my jobs that first summer was to go through a bunch of old files and organize them. And a lot of the pictures were of survivors of house fires, accidents. It was pretty grisly stuff. But one of the things I learned is how fire works and how it breathes. And I didn't know that prior to working there. So, and that image has always haunted me, and I wanted to write specifically about it. The other image is just the vastness of time and space. My son and I, when he was little, when I first started writing this book 5-6 years ago, we're watching all those Morgan Freeman narrated shows on Discovery Channel and Science Channel, and just thinking about how big it is and how impossible that is to conceive. And so those 2 things kind of work together. So I'll start by reading 2 sections of the title poem, which is a long 20-page poem in the middle of the book. So this is section 6 from Aflame. When on fire, only the spirit fights harder than the body. The mutiny we undergo when aflame. First the wildness, the running away, then the rigidity. I've seen the pictures in the firehouse's filing cabinet. I worked there several summers, wrote reports, looked at evidence, a succumbing. It's not the burns that kill, so many photos of dismantled bodies. It's the lack of oxygen. The fire eats it all. The fire wants to breathe more than you do. Section 8 from Aflame. She says the dog's ear is swollen or filled with. Later, we learn a new word. Together, our tongues click it, hematoma. And like that, the lyric happens. I'd like to tie you a ribbon around your wrists behind your back and lay you down. We stumble. We don't do it like that, you say. There is a way to say marriage without this. Beautiful in the cellar, beautiful in the attic. How much of you? I will put anything in my mouth. So one of the questions I ask myself all the time is how to write about subjects that are bigger than myself, which is hopefully most subjects. But sometimes I don't know the answer to that question. And this poem is wrestling with some of those subjects that feel almost impossible to embrace. Perhaps they'll be evident in the poem. And I wrote this poem in a hotel room, or started writing it in a hotel room in Austin, Texas, 4, 5, 6 years ago. And it's called History Repeats Itself as Seen from My Hotel Room Window. The horses that gallop overhead on the hotel room wall, brown dust, unfurl those beasts into a connect the dots of whirl and prairie. They say exile begins at birth. I want to say I understand, but understand I don't want to say. When you board a plane, do you ever think these may be the last faces I'll ever see? How about when standing on the corner, not selling Lucy's, or walking through a park, in the street? Fear is the difference between space and time if time is a stubborn fool. We must face ourselves as we have in half the light in us. Without present, past, and future, there's no consciousness. We must hold them simultaneously, like how our brains, as we shift our gaze across the room, suppress our vision. In order to compensate, we assume, not unreasonably, that everything in the room is stationary, a nowhere tide. The news moves like this too. Cherry Blossom Festival, local fifth grader wins science fair, police shoot unarmed man, a black man, a young black man, a black boy, a mother's child. Every night in November is darker longer than the last. Be merciful, be kind, be the flash snowfall makes under the streetlight. Be and swallow, bait a man with a promise of furthermore. We cannot muster. I'll have no part of things perennial. The purpose of time is to slow us down this downward roll we travel. The broad back of the carp I caught in the Fox River, the grunt and breath of it as I unhooked from its lip the flash. How milky its lips to touch, though below that flesh a great dam of bone. Once we have worked long in the sun to tear one thing from another, we might think we have proved the world beautiful. Proof beneath the fires that burn down churches, a rubbed shadow. Truth begins when you say it's all history. There's a backdrop, flame and flame, how the night can wear the moon its mirror. There is no light here, only smoke, which is itself a map of the universe, a pattern not unlike the way a voice can hang beside a body and go unheard. Not a sensation, but a repetition. Montgomery, Selma, Baton Rouge, even cicadas can pick the cotton. We've no room for any more, thank you. When we listen, we hear one chord at a time. It is only our sense of past and future that makes it a song. So another thing that, as I was writing some of these poems, another thing that I was fascinated by was all of the unmanned space explorations that we have had in our nation's history, and how far some of those are now from Earth. The Voyagers in particular are, I can't remember the numbers, that you can follow them on Twitter and they ping back how far away they are, but they're extraordinarily far away. And I was fascinated by that, and fascinated by non-human space travel and also human space travel. And this poem wrestles with a little bit of that. And it's titled First Celestial Body. Logic, like time, like stars, has no back door, knows only one direction. As with praying, I don't know where to start. She wrote, "It feels better if my eyes are pressed shut, because so much escapes vision. The view of two oceans simultaneously. Am I alone? Dawn about to move, let me forget. I lift my hands to lace my fingers. Prayer is the mouth of the singer muted. I crack open his door, my son, to remember light, how even it can fail. I read once that a certain kind of grasshopper glows in the dark, or maybe it was a jellyfish. Their bodies like a boy's in sleep, static but dreaming, for the young. I watch until he puts his feet to the floor and is awake. He will not stop again until he dreams. Why do people do cruel things? We hope our neuroses are not pathologies. We pass down a moment's work, but imagination, things divine. Surviving a funeral, a coffin borne by youth. Subtlety is a lifelong pursuit. I wish for you what I wished before, but harder. Betrayal and eggs and lard, skip this, and the interwoven poplar trees out back, how their limbs clap together high above the ground. The wind its own theater. If destruction be our lot, said a wise man. How do we survive survival, the aftermath that's new? 1959, Russia, the first humans to see, to know the other side, and the crater, dark and deep, that faces us, the sea of tranquility. Delivered via feed, slowly the men in the control room ate fish bones, cold broth were our only shade against a war we didn't understand. Stealing, drinking like beasts disputed with fists, their own yearn to be seen and only enough saliva. Finally rain saved the well, so scarce. Your house I spend the day, if you don't like the sea. Of course it's the birds that hear me, eyes and herds and clusters, the idea side of faces. We aren't infinitely present, ever, You have a twin, an identical twin to it's the body that refuses understanding until something makes sense. There's so much I want to tell you, son, that you aren't ready to hear. There are ugly deaths, and then there are the already dead. You who grow up in a movie version of a storm, underlings and cowards your parents wore lapping at your feet on TV, images of the sea and the sea that hangs like a painting. You can't reach through the glass case from your stroller. Daddy, it's so big and it's so far away. Someday your father will lay to rest after his body. He will be the color of your dead father. Heart failure, while your mother in a suburb where no houses stand empty. There will be now an empty house, and I'm sorry. I read a fact that says, and I tend to believe it, that by the age of 60, we will have lost 200,000 things. So this one's titled, By Age 60, We Lose 200,000 Things. Our sense of duty, if we're lucky. The Greeks didn't have a word for blue, the wine dark, they called it, the sea. Our keys, skyward toward the plains, is a failure of imagination. If we can't name it, does it exist? Once upon a time, the earth was flat because we didn't know any better. Once upon a time, the most kissed face in the world. Our souls, you can't say we didn't warn you. Cicadas every 17 years, a brood is a brood, but we all know their hard shells are murderous to beauty, impenetrable, invisible as pinpricks as they spiral from the treetops to entangle your hair. Our options, spiritual error, our options. One inside another, we squeeze out of ourselves the shade caught brilliantly in the corners. Have you ever slept in an attic? The way the light both contains and illuminates, the shutters may be clasped or loosened, your rhythm, the rhythm of last year's holiday lights banging against the gutter, our timing, how nothing once churned ever ends, how what continues, our minds, continues even when out the window darkness comes. Finally, one more brief section from Aflame. Thank you again to Alan and to Matt for inviting me into this fray, and also to Justin, whose work I look forward to, and to you who are listening. This is section 2 of Aflame. The thighs hollow, the visible breath, and you are perched at the bed's edge. I'm pinioned and you say you don't want to live here anymore. Blurs the wind. We are on the cusp, air from your mouth like wing beats. You don't get it. I'm the resident, I'm the aloe, we're unspooling. On all fours, my pulse pummels. I see a cavern, a rill, the slow accretion of the dark, dark. This is primal. This is what binds us to fall into our backs again, to swallow one another. We are convenient as the sun spills the room. Watch. We've come here only bodies and will leave consumed. Thank you.
Wow, very good, very good. So if this is the first time you've been here, we're going to have a brief Q&A afterwards, but right now we're just going to roll along with the next reader. But in the meantime, Gary, if you want to copy and paste some links to Aflame or to other work in the chat, go right ahead. People look in the chat for those. Very nice, very wonderful work. Okay, so moving on to Justin. Oops, let me check to make sure. Yeah, I should spotlight myself. Okay. So Justin Munhank is pursuing a PhD at Ohio University, Athens, and lives in southeastern Ohio. His work has appeared with Granta, Hobart, the Literary Review, and others. He holds an MFA from the University of Wyoming. And Justin, please, sir, take it away. Oh wait, I need to unmute you. And then you can take it away. Let's see, Justin, there you are. Okay.
Awesome. Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so yeah, thanks Alan and Christy for having me. And Gary, thanks for letting me read alongside you. I appreciate it. So I'm just gonna read a couple like flash pieces here. This first one I got on a kick where I wanted to like try to write stories that were somehow based on John Prine songs. So this is kind of a little flash piece that's based on a John Prine song. It's called Too Long, Too Late. I was in between runs that fall, and the cold came on slow and uncertain. Leaves lingered too long. 2 weeks before Halloween, a man escaped from the county jail. On WSAZ, a reporter shoved a mic in the sheriff's face outside the station. We study all available routes, he said. We know why, but not how or where. Kathy pointed a cigarette at the TV and laughed out smoke. She was taking another break from quitting. That man is a lost man, she said. Which one, I asked. Doesn't matter, she said. Then a shovel went missing from the barn. 2 cans of kerosene, a shepherd's hook. I slept with a 410 wedged between my side of the headboard and the nightstand. Kathy told me I'd wake up a few seconds too late. When I wasn't on the road, I ate lunch at the diner just to watch Kathy polish the cutlery. Sometimes she put a spoon or fork in her purse. You can never be too careful, she'd say. If a song came on the radio she didn't like, she'd change the station, setting off the manager in the back. That shit drives me crazy, she said, dropping a butter knife into her purse. She came up holding a cigarette. I kept her company as she smoked out back, each drag longer than the last. The dog barked at a stray cat hiding between the dumpsters and the fence. Further off, an ambulance cried down the highway. I'm so damn tired of this place, she said. I asked her to come with me on my next run. You can drive as fast as flying, I said, and the sky is big enough for you to breathe. What would I do? I can't sit in a truck all day. No, I said. What about my mom, she said. Yes, I said. The night before I left, it rained so hard I couldn't sleep. Something moved under the trailer, and even in the dark, I knew the leaves had finally fallen off by the wind rushing them around. 2 days later, I called from a payphone outside a truck stop in Cheyenne. The wind blew snow tornadoes across the parking lot as I towed a broken beer bottle with my shoe. They found him hiding with family in Huntington, Kathy said, in a basement. I could tell the time difference by the 11 o'clock news in the background, the clear cough that wasn't hers. A bottle whispered open. How's your mother? I asked. Good, she said. Fine. She says hello. They opened the gates on the interstate the next morning, and I came down the pass into Laramie, thinking it looked like a TV dinner taken from the back of a freezer. We were like that for years, asking questions that weren't questions because we knew all the answers. I kept going until she was far away from me, knowing all along I'd have to come back. Okay. All right. Yep, so that is Too Long, Too Late. And then I have, I call this like a COVID story. It has nothing to do with COVID, but I've been noticing like I'm having a hard time sometimes being able to like sit down and like focus on a longer story. So I've been trying to write these little flash pieces in between just so I can actually sit down and focus for a little while. So this one's called To the Mississippi, to the Moon. It was the last time at the lake before Bobby left for the riverboat job, and I wished you were there. All day it had this lilt like he was on the verge of flying for the first time. Bought a fifth on nerve alone that we drank straight from the bottle. He wouldn't let up about the pay. First thing I do, he said, is trade on a Silverado with a lift kit and 37-inch tires. Gonna ride high when I'm home. All that for 6 months of a year, I said. That and more. He had it all planned out. A modular home by spring, new air yachts, an above-ground pool. Whatever his mom couldn't buy, he'd own. Land too. Now's the time for making plans, he said, while the body's good and interest rates low. All this talk and no mention of a ring had me feeling like a pair of Payless shoes. What the hell you know about interest rates, I asked. Enough, he said, and tipped back the fifth in a hurry. It was good to see him pared down a little. to know he was still Bobby, uncertainty showing in his jaw set and the way he picked at the bottle label. He'd go when the time came and return work lean, hands muscled over from tying off barges, a name for every knot he knew. Not much different from your visit after basic. Muscles in your neck that hadn't been there before, scalp showing through the fuzz on your head. Mom had said, "Where's my boy and what have you done with him?" And you said, "Right here, always will be," even though we all knew that couldn't be true. I took the bottle, raised it. "To interest rates," I said, and Bobby's face went soft. We drank like that for a while, fog hanging low over the water and frogs like stirring bed springs. Excuse me. "To the Ohio," Bobby said. "To the Mississippi," I said. "To the Gulf, to the moon, to the Milky Way. To you," I would have said, if gravel hadn't crunched at the mouth of the holler. It was too late for a park ranger, so Bobby figured deputy. "I don't need any trouble before leaving," he said. I gripped his hand and we lit for the woods to nestle behind a tree felled from the ice storm. Headlights flickered leaves. I remember the hearse as the car slow crawled to the turnaround and thought, only for a moment, this is how your ghost would visit me. It wasn't a cruiser after all, but a four-cornered LeSabre with bricked headlights. A low, tinny music escaped the cab, and two men emerged as shadows from the dim overhead. They were thinking by the way they whispered, and the driver leaned back inside to fumble through the glove box and kill the engine. "Hello," he said, training a flashlight on the ground. "Who's out there?" Bobby wrapped his lips around the bottle, his eyes trying to become 8-balls. The driver shined the beam inside Bobby's Chevy, over the bed, along the foggy bank, and across the trees behind us. "I pictured you sighting down a buck and settled." "Nobody here," the other one said. The driver quit the flashlight, popped the trunk. "On your last visit, you said people stay here because they're afraid of the unknown, of leaving something behind, even of coming back, their tails shame tucked. That wouldn't be you, you said. You were gone, out, goodbye. Your next return, and always after that, only a visit. We were all around the fire, drunk, but I hated you in that moment, the line drawn between us. I ain't afraid, Bobby said. Prove it, you said, your eyes on mine the whole time. I turned in on myself then, let you and Bobby have the night, and sat with an anger dull and heavy as a creek rock. But you saw it like you always did, that sense between us I worried we'd lose from the distance, that I feared was already fraying. Who would I talk to then? Who would know what I was thinking? You apologized the next morning through a gauzy hangover without actually saying the words. Mom frying eggs over medium. I want a truth account while I'm gone, you said. Promise. You leaned close like we used to as kids, pretending it was a mirror we were looking at, noticing not the differences, my long hair, the freckle at the corner of your eye, but what made us the same? Promise, I said, thinking, how could I not? So here it is. Bobby called last week to say he's staying south for a while, that plans have changed. Said it with no surprise at all. I could hear people laughing in the background, furniture moving, a party going on. I hope you have a good time, I said, and hung up. Sometimes Mom chokes up when I come home from the food and save, my hair pulled up, and Dad's been let off from the railroad. Most nights I lie awake thinking about Bobby and what you said about being afraid. I think about those men too, laboring with something long and slick in the darkness, about the night sounds plucking a cord, soft and curious in my stomach, boots scuttling gravel, a plopped bullfrog, how the trunk shut and doors slammed in no time at all, the men leaving us with the night so wide open we couldn't tell if it was beginning or ending. We ought to go, Bobby said, passing the bottle. I wiped my lips, smiled stupid at the night. What's the rush, I said. We've got nowhere else to be. Bobby shook his head an unreasonably long time, and I knew he'd follow me a little while longer, when all he really wanted was to hit the highway in search of another. the roads here pointing in the same direction eventually. The lake wasn't much but shallows and hydrilla that time of year, exposing the spot where we'd once found a recliner, the rusted shards of a shotgun, a dollhouse. Bobby worried the grass with his boot tip behind me as I knelt at the edge and slowly sank into the sludge. I reached out to make sense of the tarp's edges in the moonlight, my heart throbbing at my temples. What if I told you I saw a pair of dead eyes, not so different from yours or mine? And what if I said I was too afraid to look away? How would that change anything? How would that bring any of you back? Okay, thank you.
Wow, thank you. Very, very good. I'm going to allow everyone to unmute themselves. And if you would like to ask a question, sorry, just did that. If you'd like to ask a question, go ahead and you can either unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can use the chat. I think what we found is we'll stop the recording now, and we can just say whatever we want. And so if you're here on the YouTube later, thank you very much for joining us. If you're here on the Zoom now, please hang on.